Hi YouTube, just kidding. I don't talk like that. That's not how this is going to be introduced. Today, I'm talking about the divide in the fighting games community on Tech Girl Talks episode 3. So just a quick recap if you've just joined me and you have no clue what this is about. Every week on a Wednesday at 1 p.m. SAST, I do a live Just Chatting stream over on Twitch. My link is in the description, so make sure you go and follow. And I basically just talk about whatever topic you ask me to talk about. So this is the one that we're going to be discussing today. If you have a topic that you'd like me to chat about, drop it in the comments to this video. I'd be keen to investigate a little bit more. Of course, this is a VOD. So this was recorded live. There were questions live, and I've cut it up nicely for you so you can watch it in case you missed it. But if you do have any questions, again, drop them in the comments. I'll try and answer them as best I can. Or join my Discord. There's a join link in the description of this video. You can come jump in and chat to me there as well, and you'll get some answers in real time. Let's jump into episode 3. Welcome to episode 3 of Tech Girl Talks. In this episode, we are going to chat about the divide in the fighting games community. So this topic was actually suggested by one of the people who watch this, one of the viewers. And to be honest, as it stands, it's a pretty broad subject, right? But for the sake of this specific episode, I'm going to narrow it right down. So a couple of things. The first is that I'm going to be focusing on South Africa, because I think it pertains to developing regions, specifically where the divide that I'm going to be focusing on is so prevalent. And here's the thing, the question itself is pretty broad, right? So when we say the divide, could we be talking about the divide in between different fighting game titles? Could we be talking about the divide between the top players and maybe new players coming in? Could we be talking about the divide between areas or specifically provinces? Because obviously fighting games are best played on land versus online. I mean, there is so much that we can talk about here. But I'm gonna put my head on a chopping block and say, in the last week with this specific topic, I started chatting to a couple of people, and I spent the last week digging around. I spoke to some top players, I spoke to some tournament organizers, I spoke to some casual gamers as well, and I kind of think I've found the divide topic that's coming up, and it's kind of interesting. So that's the one we're going to get into, but I'm going to get into that in a bit. But first I want to say, don't forget, if you do have a question and you're in the live chat right now and you want your question answered, I do a question and answers section at the end of the stream. So to get your question answered, !join, and then write your question, add it in. I'll answer it at the back. And also, if you can't stay for the whole stream, don't worry about it, because what I do is I upload the entire VOD to my YouTube channel every Friday morning. If you have a topic that you'd love for me to discuss, then just drop it in as well, because I'm always looking for new stuff. But if you want to see the VOD, you can go check it out on YouTube. And if you're watching the VOD right now, what's up? You should be here in the live chat every Wednesday, 1 p.m. There we go. Okay, so fighting games, the fighting games community is pretty big, right? It's a pretty big one. And fighting games is actually, this is something that I think a lot of people don't appreciate when it comes to esports. Without a doubt, I'm probably going to be in trouble, but without a doubt, I believe that fighting games is the reason we have esports. I believe it was where it started, in the arcades. I believe we have a lot to pay homage to, and we owe the fighting games community so much for getting it started. I know that's controversial. Some people won't agree with me, but you know what? I don't care, because this is my channel and I'm saying it. Fighting games is the reason we are where we are. But then I got asked this question about the divide, and I know what you're thinking. What divide? What is she talking about? I can see in the chat a couple of people are saying, oh, but I thought we were all friends. I'm going to get into that. But before we do that, what I actually want to do is I kind of want to give you a little bit of a breakdown. So like I mentioned, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the South African fighting games community, because I think developing regions are a really good example of the so-called divide. So in order to do that though, you're going to have to watch a bunch of videos with me, because I think a lot of these videos are really important to the conversation we're going to be having, and I kind of want to show them up. So the first video I've got is from a gent called Sigma G19. I think he did a really good example of just showing the history of fighting games in South Africa and fighting game tournaments. So that's what we're going to watch right now.
This is Africa. This is South Africa. And this is the South African fighting game community. A little while ago, I did a short video on South African arcades, briefly covering its history and current state. Like everywhere else outside Japan, South African arcades prospered until the late 2000s, and while a few arcades still exist, they aren't nearly as frequented as they were in the past. Games like Third Strike, MVC2, King of Fighters 11, or even Street Fighter 4 weren't available at our arcade. If you wanted to play any of those, you'd have to get a console, the game, your controller of choice, and hope you knew somebody offline that you could play with. Quite the time and money investment that many players were lost to. But there were those who embraced the change. Almost everyone that owned a console played Tekken, and just like everywhere else in the world, once Street Fighter 4 dropped, fighters in South Africa were revived. But players wanted more than the shoddy online or weekly offline sessions. They wanted the thrill that only a tournament could offer. By 2011, Ryan S.A. Phoenix Williams would host Cape Town Showdown, South Africa's first and eventually longest running multi-fighting game tournament.
Good luck, enjoy it.
CTS was a huge step forward in the development of South Africa's fighting game community. Finally, players could test their abilities against other competitive players in a tournament setting. People came from everywhere to compete, different parts of Cape Town, other provinces, even other countries. CTS was incredibly well received. Everybody that attends these really gives a damn about their fighters. It's a tournament by the community for the community. The setups, prizes, time and money that's required for the tournament's success has always been a group effort.
For the tournament matches, I had guys contributing the consoles for the casuals. Leads, speakers, games. I couldn't have done it on my own. I'm not that well off. So
That's my favorite part.
So give yourselves a round of applause for your contribution as the community, as the FGC. You guys deserve it. Thank you guys.
On a more personal note, thanks to CTS, I've improved tremendously as a player and made some friends that share an interest I had no idea there was still a local scene for, a sentiment echoed amongst many players that joined the scene.
It's quite cool that you play someone who plays well. It's like you're scared, you have the excitement.
Yes.
I mean, really, who else am I going to play Azura Buster, Dragoon Might, or Plasma Sword with in 2015? Better yet, see me in Kenshi Loves You or Avenge Your Dad matches. While most of what I've covered in this video is from the Cape Town scene, the FGC certainly has a presence in different parts of South Africa as well, with players in Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth, East London and Durban. What I've presented here is but a summary of our ever-unfolding history. Something that I believe that all the players on the African continent would like to see is any kind of support for the African players that have been supporting these games for all these years. It sucks that events like Capcom Pro Tour or Tekken World Tour
Not
don't
anymore.
have an event anywhere in
Just,
Africa.
this is a bit of
And
an
yet the
old
players
video,
are
so I just
certainly
need
there.
to jump in and say not anymore.
Aside from the players in South Africa, there is some serious talent in countries like Cameroon, Mozambique, DRC, Angola, not to mention Morocco. So an African tournament is certainly a possibility. I dream of the day legends from other continents trade blows with us here in Africa. Though I feel the wheel of fate is turning. Recently, SNK has sponsored a local community tournament called Random Select, which featured King of Fighters 14 and Tekken 7. This meant so much to me and many of the players from the arcade days, since KOF has a long running history in Cape Town, so to have SNK support was surreal.
City, Max is mad! Oh yeah! That's what I like to see. Full Combi City
And who can forget longtime friend and Tekken legend D, who made it all the way from Thailand to compete in random selects. With limited access to overseas competition, we really appreciate the opportunity to play against a player of his caliber. The SA players put up a really good fight last tourney, so I suppose our dream of becoming competitive on an international level is slowly becoming a reality.
Good game, but good games, well played. Wow, that was some of the most amazing games that we've seen today.
And the grind never stops. Events like Random Select or Cape Town Showdown would be nothing without those who put the effort into making the scene what it is today. You have my respect and gratitude. I'm sure the South African FGC isn't the only scene that hasn't received any big attention. I'd say, regardless of whether your scene is comprised of 5 or 50 members, the players make the scene. So if you connect with your community and support each other, it is possible to build something truly marvelous. If you'd like to connect with the South African FGC, there is an active Discord server that we use to arrange matches, offline sessions, tournaments, complain, and call each other free. And that about wraps it up for this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.
Okay, cool. So I feel like that's such a great video that just kind of showcases where the scene is, where it's going, things like that. There's a lot of stuff that we need to break down in there that comes up. But I have a few more things that I want to talk about. So obviously that was done relatively early on. It's a bit of an older video because obviously we've been included in all this international stuff now. And it really came about because the community was building their own events and various members of the community were jumping in. But then a bunch of tournament organizers got involved as well. So you had people like the Button Bashers crew. Someone is sending me like a million messages. The Button Bashers crew came in and started doing stuff. Big tournament organizers like ACGL and Medal State started running fighting games. And of course, these guys, you gotta show them some love. So UGCZA also came in. I had to show them there because they've done a lot as well for the community. So there's all these new players, right? Everyone's jumping in, everyone's getting involved, everyone's trying to build something, which is what you saw in that first video, this need for the community to get together and to build something. And that's exactly what started to happen. Red Bull then got involved, and of course I've got to have to bring up Hit the Streets. Completely biased, I know I've worked both of them, I was there right from the beginning, but this was such an important moment. And of course after the first Hit the Streets, I think he's in the chat, so I'm quite excited to share this. But this for me is such a cool moment for the fighting games community.
Red Bull Hit the Streets prize to go into Kumite's last chance qualify and battle it out. That's something that, you know what, everybody definitely wants to do. So I'm JabhiM, Red Bull Hit the Streets 2019 champion. I didn't know how to feel because remember, like, I've only been on a flight twice. First time Red Bull put me on my first flight going to Cape Town. And now they put me on my first flight going overseas. The whole experience of going to Japan and actually playing other players that play this game on a daily, like everyone wants to see how they fare against them. To get invited is such an honor in itself, you know, to get invited to Red Bull Kumite. But the event in itself was like, it's a prestigious event. Because then, when you get there, you definitely feel like an athlete. I can guarantee you now, nobody does not feel like an athlete when they play in Kumite. And Gaji-kun walked in. So I started chatting with Gaji-kun, and then Luca was like, Jabhi, I have a surprise for you, you know. He's like, follow me. Then he told Gaji-kun where he's going. Eh? But I think I'm not sure if he told Gaji not to tell him, because Gaji didn't say anything. We're just walking together. From there, like even when I'm chatting to him on a casual, it started being like more of a sensei, like, you know, like a teacher to me now. I was like chilling with Daigo with the backstage pass to the player lounge. You know, that's when I was like, I'm like to Daigo, can I play you? You know, and Daigo's like, sure, we can play. You know, I'm thinking maybe he's gonna play 5 sets, and then done. We played almost an hour just jamming together. You know. Then they looked at me like, man, you from South Africa? You know, I'm like, yeah. You know, and everybody was like, oh, for real? South Africa has a scene? Then they were all chill, like those are great guys, you know. So walking into that room, meeting those players, playing them, like that kind of experience, you know, is something golden. Like, you know what, you know, like screw the prizes of everything. You know, this ticket to Japan nobody can replace this. So with Red Bull Hit the Streets, I'm really happy that actually this event exists in the first place, you know. I think it gives a lot of South Africans, especially in fighting games, hope.
That's such an important thing to watch, and the reason I'm sharing it is because of that idea of hope and how important that is. And JabhiM just like changing the game in terms of going over there, getting us noticed. These are all steps that are really important in the fighting games community, and specifically in these smaller developing regions. Of course, that was the first Hit the Streets. We sent Jabhi to Japan. Things had to change because of COVID. But then there was a second Hit the Streets, which I'm going to share some of it with you now, where we introduced Tekken to the mix as well. So now we had Street Fighter and Tekken. The sound is a bit off on this video, and I apologize in advance. But I'm just going to play you the intro because I want to show you the storylines that are going to start popping up. And I kind of want to give you a feel for how deep this community is, how it's not a bunch of unknowns, how everyone here has been jamming for a really long time. Some of these people are in the chat right now, by the way. So don't be weird and don't get starstruck.
To Red Bull Hit the Streets 2020, coming to you live from the Red Bull Cape Town studios. Last year, we made history. We shut down an entire road
so
in
weird
Cape Town.
watching yourself on
We
screen.
crowned the best Street Fighter player in the country, and then we put him on a plane and sent him to Japan to play against the best in the world. This year, unfortunately, we can't shut down a road because we didn't really want to have a big party here. We're trying to be safe. We're trying to stop the spread. So instead, we're hoping that you're having a party at home on the stream because you get to watch some of the best fighting games action South Africa has to offer. And guess what? It's not just Street Fighter this time. For 2020, we've added a second title. Tekken 7 is in the mix as well. At the end of tonight, 2 players from South Africa are going to fly to Japan for Red Bull Kumite 2021, so long as they can travel and we sort this pandemic out. They'll be overseas, and we'll get to put 2 South Africans on the stage against the best in the world. In order to get here, we have 4 players for each title. In order to do that, they had to play a host of online qualifiers. The best players qualified to come here to the studios, and today the 4th player got to qualify in our last chance qualifiers. They played, I've said qualifiers about 72 times now. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to say this word again, but they are here, our 4 finalists ready to battle. Let's just jump straight into it now with some Tekken 7 action, and joining me on this couch, Snare and Mr. Chocolates.
Hello.
You gotta be hyped because we actually qualified 2 players today, so this was an exciting one, all new players. It was kind of a 50-50, which means we don't know what's going to happen tonight.
Exactly, yeah. We're in a situation where the people that came through, like you mentioned, 2 new players, right? But that also means that there's more X factor, and they're warmed up. They've already been playing, right? And I know you've spoken about this a lot before on stream, about how players that have been in the mode, been in the zone, already have that advantage going forward. So they qualified, but have they qualified enough? Do they have enough chutzpah now?
Definitely. We'll have to see. They have to act like a locomotive. You know what I mean? Never stop, keep going forward. If they stop now and they lose momentum, I don't know what's going to happen. But the thing is, the type of skill we got in the studio today,
while he's saying all of this, Mr. Chocolates, I'm smiling at him like that, but I'm actually listening to someone talking in my ear.
You mentioned the skills, so let's take a look.
This is the part I wanted you to see, though.
Qualifiers for Red Bull Hit the Streets, Tekken 7. The first gents up there, Callum, the backdash king.
Definitely.
Known for that for a reason. Like you see there, he will punish you. You make any mistakes, you stay out of his range, you're going to get...
Iggy's in the chat.
Definitely. Yay! But the thing is, can he take out the Money Mayweather, the big daddy of the tournament this time around? He is the favorite, so let's see if someone can make a dent in him.
I mean, if somebody can make a dent in him, right, it's going to be this man right here who is, as you were mentioning, always on locomotive pressure with his Marduk plays. If there's someone who can keep that pressure going, it's going to be him, right?
Definitely. My man is as aggressive as they come. But speaking about how aggressive they can be, we have Cactar Kid, the man literally known to bob and weave in and out of trouble and be able to score a W in the nick of time. Can he make it through this really rigorous field of...
The reason I wanted to show you all of that is just to show you what a cool community we have and how everyone is really, you know, it's just hype. And we've been building these storylines and just having the best time, getting involved, jumping in there. And that for me was something that I wanted to show you, is how the scene has grown. And now, before we get into the serious stuff and the growing and sending players overseas and getting big brands involved, what divide are we talking about, right? So I'm gonna get into that right now. It's gonna get insane. But before we do that, don't forget, if you have any questions while we're doing this, !join, drop your question, and I will answer them at the end of this stream. Also, just a quick full disclosure. Everything you're about to see, everything I'm about to say is completely my opinion. And my opinion is not necessarily right. It could be wrong, which means if you have a different opinion, I am completely open to you having that conversation with me, whether it be on my Discord, whether it be in the stream right now, whether it be on my YouTube comments. So long as we all play nice, I think we can debate this. But when I got this question about the divide in fighting games, it was kind of weird for me because I started, obviously, I didn't want to dive into what divide the person was saying. I kind of was like, let's just, you know, you go in blind because that's the best way to find out information. And I started speaking to the community. I tweeted out about, can anyone comment about this divide? You can do it anonymously. Lots of people did. I spoke to organizers, top players, casual players, all off the record. No one, I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. And in the beginning, everyone was pretty much, I went into we saw that FGC Discord. I went in there and I literally just dropped a message. I was like, I don't talk about the divide. And people were like, no ways, we're all friends, we're all family, we're all having the best time. What are you talking about? And then I slowly just started scratching. And I'm not going to lie, Iggy, who put this topic in, dude, you made my life very hard. This was a very difficult topic to navigate because... One, I think a lot of people, maybe they know me from when I've been on Hit the Streets, but they don't maybe necessarily know me. So they weren't comfortable talking to me. Some people were comfortable talking to me. Some people word vomited all their personal shit on me. And it was really difficult. But I think I've kind of got the gist of where we are. I've just realized, because I'm an idiot, that I didn't line up probably the most important video of them all. And give me a sec while I just sort this out. There we go. I'm hoping this is going to work. Let me just do a quick fix on my side. So when we talk about this divide that came up, right, and the conversation that has to happen, I think what I started to realize is as these conversations started happening is that the divide in question, the divide that came up and the one that I kind of want to focus on is actually universal. This isn't unique to the South African fighting games community. It ain't unique to fighting games in general. And just to kind of explain where I'm going with this, I've got this clip that I think will do a lot of a. My English is so good. We'll do a better job of explaining where I'm coming from.
A lot of bad blood there. Clearly, a lot of bad blood. There. And a lot of folks had been talking kind of through the grapevine that this whole COVID situation could give us an opportunity to kind of maybe hit the reset button there. You know, maybe like, hey. Because a year and a half to not have to deal with somebody is a long time, and while that happened, they could possibly forgive and work with. Right. But of course, for that to kind of go down the way it did, but it's there's the lack of communication is the big part. There's so much animosity. I don't know if the animosity is both ways, but I do know the lack of communication is both ways on this one. So it's something as simple as a message to where. even when Alex was looking to move back, if he had just messaged, Eric before him, be like, hey, are you doing something? This is what I'm doing. And then could have worked something out. And then, when he saw that announcement go up, that's when it's like, hey, I was going to run CEO. Like, how can we, like, what can we do? How can we make this work?
Yeah.
Because that's always been a reason why the grassroots voice has never been as powerful as it could be. Because the figureheads have never been united. It's always been, everyone has their fiefdom. And so for that to happen, for this to have gone down the way it did, it's people are just like, oh, F. And then again, in this case, JabhiM's reputation precedes him. Even if, when you look at the timeline, okay, he was putting the stuff out there. Why was nothing said then? Well, why did he not extend, like, when NEC's traditionally been?
Right.
Why didn't you? I mean, like, were you going to bully them out like you tried to bully Larry out? Is that what happened here?
I'm going to stop that there because I think it gives you the gist of where this conversation is about to go. And that particular issue, if you need to know, there was an event and someone tweeted about it, then someone else tweeted their event at the same time, and then there was a fight, and it's something that we see all it is. Iggy mentions it as well. It is universal. And that's the thing, right? So on the surface, we're all fine. We're all cheering for one another. Of course, we got hyped. I watched all those videos. We're freaking stoked because secretly we all love the games. And we just desperately want to see our little bubble, explode. Whether it is the tiny bubble that is esports in South Africa, the fighting games community, or the bigger bubble that is esports, or the bigger bubble that is gaming. We want to see it blow up on the international stage. But then behind the scenes, there's these like weird underlying issues that exist, right? And like I said, it isn't specific to fighting games. And I'm going to kind of go into this now. I'm going to use an example of my own to try and explain this, because obviously I needed to relate. This is something I needed to relate it to my experience, because I'm talking from my opinion and I can only give you my opinion from my personal experience. So I'm going to use something that from my journey in esports, which isn't specific to fighting games, to kind of highlight this divide that came up. Because when I started speaking to everyone, like I said, these little things started coming up, these little things of these pockets of things that popped up, which kind of made me go, oh, I see what the problem is. So I'm gonna explain my thing, okay, as an example of where I think that this divide comes from and my personal experience with it and how it relates to the fighting games community, okay? So when I started in esports, hosting and commentating, I'd been a fan for a while. My brother competed. I'd been watching that stuff. And I kind of saw all these people doing this thing, and I was like, oh, cool, I might try that. Some people encouraged me. I was kind of creating some content on my YouTube channel, and I was like, yeah, let's go. And then I got offered an opportunity to host a CSGO competition. And I jumped on in there, and I went in. And don't get me wrong, I was horrible at it. Shit. I can say that openly. Absolutely shit. Completely inexperienced. Had no clue what I was doing. But watched some stuff and kind of had an idea of how I wanted it to look and feel. I took from pieces and sort of copied a few people, but then also wanted to add my own style, so dropped that in. Some of it was not right, but off I went. And the problem is that there's a group of people, when anyone new steps in, whether you step in now or whether you stepped in back when I did, there's a group of us that, and I say us now because I feel like I'm one of the older ones now, but back then there's a group of people, they've been doing this for a long time. They have fought in the trenches. They were doing this way before any of us were around. They have been doing it for free. It's blood, sweat, and tears. They put all their time into it. And then this new person comes in. And there's a way we do things, right? There's a way things have always been done. And when the new person comes in, then they start doing things that it's not the way, PTSD, that's not the way we do things. This is the way we do things. We've always done it this way. And you come in and you do something and you go, well, hold it, this new person's doing it. It's not quite what I want. And sometimes they do some bad stuff. I know for me, I did some I used to think that controversy made for good interviews. So I used to ask horrible questions to players. It wasn't a great idea. And then what happens is, so you're doing this and you're testing the waters and whatever as the newbie, and all the old people are like, sorry, no, it's not how we do that. You've got to do it like this. But you don't want to do it like that because you don't want to be stuck in the box. You don't want to be a copy of of the old guard. You don't want to be a copy of someone else. You don't want to be the budget whatever. You want to be you. You want to bring a little bit of your style. And that's the reason you're there, right? You got to bring a little bit of yourself. And then there's this weird thing that starts to happen. Because one of two things happen. One, everyone starts giving you their input and telling you what to do, which is good. You should listen to everyone. You should listen to every bit of criticism, positivity, all of it, and take what you can from any advice. You don't have to do it. You just have to listen. Take a little bit of it. Try and change it up a little bit. Anthrax in the chat has just done it so well, e-splaining. So you can listen, but you don't have to take all of it on board. You can still have a little bit of your own thing, right? But then what ends up happening is one of two things. So one, people get upset because you're not listening. They've been around longer. They know better. You're not listening. You're not doing the way it's always been done. And what also happens is sometimes when you don't do it the way it's always been done, maybe you get someone who likes that. Maybe you get someone who's watching who goes, hey, I kind of like this new style. I like this new shoutcaster. I like this vibe. This is more my vibe. This speaks more to me. This is more kind of where I wanted to go. Maybe a casual player is like, oh, I relate to this person more. Maybe a person of color is like, I like this person because they look like me and I feel like this is someone I can relate to. And maybe the new person starts getting a little bit of attention. Maybe it's attention that you wanted and you've never got. And then maybe you start getting a little bit annoyed because now you feel like, that's not right. Like, I don't like that. That person's come in here and they've shadowed over my stuff. And then this divide that we've spoken about begins to happen, in my experience, because it happened to me in there. And I'm not saying that this relates directly to the fighting games community because obviously I'm just talking about shoutcasting and hosting. This is in esports in general, this divide starts to happen. Tournament organizers, I'm actually just going to go through this whole thing. We are all competitors at the end of the day. We all want esports to succeed. We all want to make really good shows. We want to make really good tournaments. We want really good players. But tournament organizers are competitors. They're competing for eyeballs. They're competing for the best players. They're competing for sponsorships so they can do more tournaments. They're competing for the best commentators. So they're competing to put on the best show. Shoutcasters, we all have to work together, but we're also competing. We're all competing for the same jobs. We're all competing to get on the best jobs, to have the best opportunities. In the same way, I mean, this is such an obvious one. The players are competing. Obviously, that's what esports is, right? So there is a competition. That's the nature of the beast. But there is this really weird divide that happens. And I'm going to use an analogy, which I'm quite proud of. And I'm also going to low-key promote she's kind of my sister-in-law, her business, which will be quite fun. But before I do that, don't forget, if you have any questions, anything at all, it doesn't even necessarily need to pertain to this. I do a question and answer at the end. ! Join with your question, and I'm going to try and answer it. But now we're going to get into my fantastic example, which I'm so proud of. I just need to change something because that's not the way it's supposed to look. And I'm going to talk about the cake. And if you're wondering, this Deadpool cake was made by Watch Me Whip. That's you can go check them out on Instagram. It's kind of my it is my my brother's girlfriend's business, and I just love it so much. So I just dropped it in there. Let's talk about cake. Everyone loves cake, right? We all want a piece of the cake. The problem is sometimes you've been standing around the cake for a long time and you've been holding a piece of the cake, or you've just been standing around the cake waiting for someone to cut it. And a new person suddenly jostles into the queue because now they also want a piece of the cake you've been standing around. And now you start to worry because you're worried that your piece is going to be smaller and you're not going to get as much cake. Or maybe these people will jostle in front of you and they'll take all the cake and there'll be none left for you. And you've been waiting here for so long, waiting for a piece of the cake, right? So you protect your cake. You want to keep it away from everyone else. You're scared that they're going to come. And maybe they're just coming because they want to look at the cake. Maybe they don't want a piece, but you're not going to ask them just in case because you're scared if you ask them, maybe they're going to take the cake. Also, maybe you don't have a knife. Maybe you don't know how to cut the cake. But you're too afraid to ask them if they have a knife, because what happens if that means that they cut the cake and they take the piece? So you're not going to communicate. You're just going to stand and you're going to push your shoulders out and you're going to keep the cake away from everyone else. And now they don't understand why you won't let them near the cake. So now everyone becomes obsessed with protecting this cake to make sure that no one takes their piece, because they don't want a smaller piece, right? And they don't want any of that. Let's change to another cake because it's fun and I want to do that. Here's another cake. So now you're all fighting for the cake. And the issue here, what happens in the divide that we starts to happen, is that we're so busy worrying about everyone else's piece of cake and worrying about them stealing our cake and stealing our share of it, that we actually can't see that the cake itself is going stale. And that now the cake's not that fun because we've been so busy fighting with one another, the cake's gotten stale and now there's no cake, right? And I mean, this is a ridiculous analogy, but I was just trying to explain this in the best way I can. And also Pokemon cake. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. The bottom line here is that the divide that I wanted to talk about was specifically this idea that we're absolutely terrified of change. And that unfortunately, that fear of change leads us to the cake becoming pretty stale over time. We're so concerned about them taking the cake without realizing, and here's the truth, and I feel like this is going to be clip worthy, so someone get this one ready if you want a clip. This relates to not only the divide in the fighting games community, not only the divide anywhere. We're going to talk specifically about esports in general now. No one is, and when I say esports in general, we're talking about esports in general, and when I say this, esports in developing regions, no one's taking the cake because there's barely cake to begin with. It's a cupcake. We need to stop fighting over the cake itself and figure out a way to all come together to jump in the kitchen to bake some more cakes. And I think that's also the problem, is sometimes someone goes and bakes their own cake and then everyone looks and goes, that's better than my cake. I preferred Pikachu to Deadpool. I want that cake. Now give me that cake. I don't want the cake I have. I want that cake. Instead of going, well, hold on, explain to me how you made that. Give me some insight into how you made that cake, because then I'm going to go and I'm going to go to the bakery and I'm going to make my own cake like that. Instead it goes, well, I want that cake. And that is the fundamental divide that we see in a lot of these situations. And like I said, the divide that I kind of dug a little bit and saw that there was a little bit of stuff going on where people were a little bit uncomfortable to talk about it, didn't really want to. I'm just removing some stuff quickly before we get into this. Didn't really want to talk about it, but we're more interested in, there was this like underlying issue of people being like, well, you know, this isn't right, and this person maybe sometimes does this, or that person does this. And then what we have is a situation where there is this little divide that no one's talking about. And like I said, it exists everywhere, especially in developing esports, whether it be shoutcasting, playing, tournament organizers, etc., etc. So that's the divide I kind of want to focus on, not just in the fighting games community, but everywhere else. And I think because this is a positive space, so I ain't here to shit on people. I've got some stuff. I got some screen grabs. I got some fun things that I could talk about, but I don't want to do that. I'm not here to spill the tea or whatever. What I want to talk about is how do we fix this? So how do we, as fighting games enthusiasts, esports enthusiasts, fix this? And I'm going to do just that. But before I do, don't forget, if you do have any questions, I'm going to get into a question and answer section in a little bit. !join, drop your question in and I'll try and answer them. But now let's get into how I see us changing this. This is my opinion. Again, feel free to add your bits. So the first thing is, you don't have to like everyone. Sometimes there are people that you don't like. And that's okay. There are people that I don't like. I won't work with them. That's okay. Okay? You don't have to like them. You don't have to like what they're doing. You don't have to shit on what they're doing either. You don't have to tell everyone that what they're doing is shit. You can simply just get on with your stuff. You can just get on with making your own cake. You do not need to stand behind them and tell everyone how crap their cake is. You can legitimately just fuck off. Sorry for the language, but like, for real. Like I said, there are people and brands and organizations that I don't work with. But I don't go online and tell everyone. I don't sit in and tell everyone how much. I just carry on with my business. I've had some bad moments. I'm not perfect, but you know, I've learned now. And I think that this is the other thing, is cheering for other people will not undermine your own stuff. It's actually okay to publicly support one another. It's okay for you to cheer for people. It's okay for a tournament organizer to support another tournament organizer's stuff. It's okay for someone to stand up and go, shit, that's pretty cool. You know, it's okay for me to watch another commentator on a job that maybe I didn't get hired for, go, you did a damn good job, and tell them that's okay. It's okay for me to share that and say, that's pretty cool. It's all right for a player from organization 1 to cheer on a player who gets signed for organization number 2. It's all right if you're, like I said, if you're a tournament organizer, it's completely okay to share someone else's tournament, because at the end of the day, the more time people are playing these games, the more tournaments there are, the more offers there are, the more opportunities for everyone. And I think it answers one of the questions that have just been dropped here. I'm going to address this now because it fits in really nicely, which is the question of, doesn't it create more cakes if everyone's running around doing their cakes? I mean, let's throw the cake analogy away. I think if everyone's doing something, it's growing. If we're all doing stuff and we're kind of just if I see something cool and I say that's cool, you know, that's just going to help build it. More people will come to the party if there's more cakes. Exactly like Martha said, there'll be more people jumping in and supporting and getting involved. And I think that that's really important. It isn't a massive scene. Okay, but fighting games, I mean, because I'm going to link it back to fighting games because that was what the conversation was about. Fighting games is huge here. It is so unappreciated by the mainstream. It's so unappreciated by the amount of passionate people. Like, if I speak to someone who doesn't play video games at all, right, who doesn't own a console, I guarantee you, they 100% have played a fighting game. Someone has been to an arcade somewhere or been down to the corner shop and put their coins in, and they've played Street Fighter or they've played Tekken or they've played Mortal Kombat. They know everyone has played a fighting game, and like it's one of those things that I think people don't really appreciate in smaller regions like South Africa, is how accessible fighting games are. Obviously, there's an online issue, and I could jump into this whole thing about the divide between online and real life events and things like that. But right now, I just want to talk about how important fighting games are for South African esports, how much more accessible they are, how many more players there are that maybe we're not reaching and not speaking to. But separating everyone and kind of having our own little cliques isn't going to work. You need to be sharing each other's stuff. There needs to be that thing. And I think this is the other thing, though, and this is where it gets a bit complicated, because we can't all share everyone's things all the time. Sometimes we won't see it. Sometimes we'll miss it. I think this is another thing, is that we need to be a little less sensitive about stuff. And I'm going to relate this back to a personal experience, is that obviously I hyped up Hit the Streets a lot because I was working the event. I'm very passionate about it. I was there when it started. I got to follow JabhiM's journey. I've got to follow Iggy and JabhiM now. If there's another Hit the Streets, I'd love to be involved in it. So I'm obviously sharing that stuff all the time. And then I got a message a couple of months ago where someone was like, why don't you share this? And why don't you share this fighting game? And you always miss this person's tweet, this tournament organizer's thing about their fighting games, and you miss this one. And I was like, hold on. I physically am not on the internet enough in a day to see everyone's stuff and to share. If I had to share every single thing, that's all you would see. So sometimes just because I didn't share it doesn't mean that I don't support it. And if I do see it and I try to share it, that's cool. So that's another thing. We need to be a little bit less sensitive about these things. Just because someone didn't share your stuff and didn't get super hyped behind it and offer to help you. Like, that's don't get at them. Like, just chill. We gotta be happy, you know. I'm just gonna read the chat quick. Yeah, I really like Fricky's mention. The fighting game scene is definitely much bigger now, more united than before, with platforms to communicate with one another. So in his eyes or her eyes, this is positive growth. Is there still room for improvements? Of course, but we shouldn't just ignore the fact that 6 years ago, the scene is much less accessible to many, and now it's much easier to find like-minded friends in this fighting games community. For sure. And that was something that I meant. I mean, that was why I wanted to share all the videos right at the beginning, was to show that positivity and show how much it's grown and show where we're at. So back to how we fix this all. Cheering for others, I mentioned that. And also, like I said, if you don't like someone, that's cool too. You really don't have to. You don't have to go and support their stuff. If it's not for you, it's not for you. Just don't go shit on it, you know? Another thing that I think is how to fix this and the divide that potentially exists in people's heads is to offer help. It doesn't hurt to offer someone help. If you can see someone, before I get into this, if you do have a question, can you just use !join so I can answer it at the end, because otherwise I might miss it. But the next thing that I wanted to get into is offering help. So there's nothing worse than that person, and I've had a few, who will message you all day, every day, telling you everything you did wrong and their suggestions of how you could do it better. And I get that they think they're helping, but sometimes it's not appreciated, and it can sometimes come across as someone being a bit of a dickbag. But offer the first time. You don't need to just jump in and be like, you should do this. Just be like, hey, do you want some help with this? We've had that problem on a stream before. Or, hey, do you want some help with this? You know, like, we've had this issue when organizing tournaments. Or, hey, just a quick heads up, here's some players that we've banned. Maybe you should consider banning them as well because of XYZ. It'll just streamline everything. If whoever you've offered the help to comes back and goes, no, that's okay. You offered, right? That's all. Just offer. If they don't want it, they don't want it. That's okay. You've tried. And it's in the same way as if someone offers you help. You don't have to change anything. And I think that this is the thing. If someone offers you help, for me, this is a big thing. Lots of people will feed back. And I actually, believe it or not, will read every piece of feedback I get on anything I do, because I think it's important to listen to that feedback. But I just listen. If there's something that I think you can change, I'll jump in and change it. But if I think that there's nothing of relevance, it didn't cost me anything to listen. And I think that that's also important, is we need to open our ears a little bit more. There is a question in the queue, but I'm going to answer it now, because Gans wants to know, are we talking about an actual organization or community divide? So I just want to jump in here, is that this is a very broad topic, and it just came about from sort of scratching, asking some questions and picking up. It's not just, to be honest, Gans, it's not just an org divide. There is a bit of a community, that the fighting games community, there's different segments that live, and it got quite broad because I spoke to quite a few people. So there were some people who came at me and were complaining about a divide between titles, where certain titles get more love than others, and they don't think that's fair. Then someone else came in and there was an organization conversation that happened, and then there was a conversation that I didn't really know how to address about players, where someone said that the top players are too good, and there's a divide because there's no way for new players to get better. And I wanted to respond with, just get good, mates, because that's how video games work, but I didn't, because I understand. So there's all these little divides, but I think it all buries down into the same thing, which is sometimes people are looking at one another and there's maybe just like a lack of communication, which is actually the next thing that I wanted to talk about and how we fix it. There's a lack of communication, maybe a lack of understanding. In my opinion, I'm actually going to get to this at the end, but what I wanted to say is communicate. Don't expect people to understand what's happening. Don't expect people to know all your business because you posted it on Twitter. Most people are not on Twitter all day. You need to talk a little bit. A little bit of that conversation goes a long way. And to touch on something that was interesting, this is complete like a caveat that I'm just going off on, because it's something that comes up. So obviously we saw the conversation on the YouTube video I played, but I see this in South African esports all the time, where there's clashes on events. And then everyone gets really angry and they're like, why do the tournament organizers not speak? Friends, I have watched them try. And I don't think people truly appreciate how damn difficult it is to deal with calendars across various titles with various tournament organizers and various sponsors. Because some sponsors will come in like a month before and say, we want to do this event and we want to do it right now. And we want it on this date. And then you can go to them and say, hey, listen, there's this tournament and this, it's probably not a good idea. And they're like, no, that's when we want it. And like, what do? That's the money backing the event. And in my experience on the other side, and I've pretty much worked with every tournament organizer in the country now, I think, except one, is that they do try. They really do try. They look at the calendars, they look at at the tournament organizers' social, and they do, for the most part, try avoid one another where they can. Just sometimes someone forgot to put it up. Someone forgot to tell someone else, or a sponsor comes in last minute and goes, now. And then it's a mess. But for the most part, I do think communication, not just between... God. I got to stop because we got a sub. Thank you for the sub. Dropping it in there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Defects. I'm going to get back to my conversation. But yeah, so like, there's also divides between players. I mean, there's certain players that obviously, like, it's competition, right? You don't like each other, or maybe you don't like their style, or maybe they trash talk a little bit, or you don't think they're professional. Like, all of this is here. All of that is there. But like, if you just communicate a little bit better, I think you can see a difference. And again, I'm going to go back to what I said right at the beginning. If you don't like someone, that's okay. Just don't talk to them. Like, just leave them alone. You don't have to tell them that you don't like them. You don't have to hate on them. You don't have to do anything. Just chill. It's so easy. Just chill. Just stay away from them. They stay away from you. Everyone's happy. So those are some of the ways I think we can fix the divides that come up. And like I said, this isn't just referring to the fighting games community. I think it's a conversation that goes across esports in general, and it isn't just a local thing. It happens overseas as well. You've seen Thorin lose his mind because ESL scheduled something like the week after Blast and things like that. So I think it's important for us to understand that all of these little things, and I kind of want to jump into the chat now because I saw Martha mention there's also a lot of vindictive people out there. Some people don't want to watch people grow. Of course, there is definitely that as well. Obviously, there are people that, and like I said, sometimes someone doesn't like someone else and they just can't let it go, and they want to make sure everyone knows, and they want to talk shit, and they want to get at that person, they want to hurt that person. And something that I've had to learn in time is that sometimes that speaks more about the other person. Like, there is obviously always going to be those bad apples. They exist. But they can't break you down if everyone else is together. You know what I mean? The bad apple will always be there, but if everyone else is chilling, you'll be good. And sometimes you really just have to, like, you know, let the bad apple be the bad apple. But also, it doesn't hurt to call the bad apple out. But if you're all doing it together, working together, that makes a change. So that's kind of the conversation, I suppose, for this episode. And I just want to be very clear, because I know someone's going to get upset, is that for the most part in the last few weeks, I have not been able to find the divide. I've found a couple of small things that popped up, and I've had to kind of blow it into this conversation. But everyone I've spoken to, and this has been my experience in the fighting games community since Hit the Streets, the players in this community, the top players, are phenomenal. My first introduction was the Street Fighter community at Hit the Streets. JabhiM and his boys, obviously the Joburg guys, I knew better first, but the best community in terms of welcoming me with open arms, understanding that maybe I was new to the game, and you know, understanding that I was there to do a job, but that my goal was to tell their stories, and just being so excited to share those stories with me, so excited to share their love for the game with me. was something I'd experienced it in smaller doses, but I really just got hit with the full force. They were so passionate and they were so keen to just show. And even now, man, like, I get messages on my birthday from all the Hit the Streets players, the ones that have my WhatsApp, because we were in a group for a taxi. They send me messages to say happy birthday. They send me messages all the time to tell me when they're doing get-togethers, which I haven't been to yet. My fault. I've been busy, but they'll send me messages being like, we're doing this. They always make me laugh because they'll be like, we're going to have this get-together and we're going to be playing some Street Fighter. There's like 9 of us, but there's literally no women. If you want to come, though, like, you can come and jam. It's going to be all the top players. You'll probably get your ass kicked, but please come in. Like, they've been incredible. And then moving into 2020, when I got to hang out with the Tekken crew, the same sort of vibes, just friendly and super welcoming and just like the nicest group of people. We were laughing. I never forget Iggy crawling on the floor under the camera. It was my first introduction to him. He's in the chat now, and everyone was just laughing. And then Cacti Kid was out there filming it with me. That was the vibe. The first time I met the UGC crew, you know, they jumped straight in. There's so many times where I've been at events where I can just go. I think there was a Rush event where I needed to do some stuff around I think it was the Tekken at that stage, and I wasn't quite sure, you know, what was what. And the UGC guys straight away, they were like, just come on in here, let's show you this person, you want to speak to that person, this is a really cool person, not great in front of camera, a little bit nervous, but this person, like, everyone was super welcoming and wanted to just completely build the scene. And I think what I'm trying to get to with all of this, and it's even jumping into the FGC Discord the other day where I was like, I've been in there a few times, I've asked questions, and there's always someone who wants to answer me. They give me a bit of a tough time sometimes, some of the community members, but they're quite happy to answer my dumb questions. Also, when I jumped in, that was the thing, right? When I jumped in the other day and I was like, I'm just going to throw it in there. I'm like, hey, who wants to talk about the divide in the South African gaming, fighting games community? They were like, what the hell are you talking about? We'll get on. Like, shut up, you know, like, that's not, and obviously there were like I said, there were conversations where a few little things came up. I digged very hard to kind of get a small taste of the divide I've spoken about in this episode. But I'm going to tell you now, if you are part of the fighting games community, specifically in South Africa, friends, your drama and your divide is so much smaller than what I've seen in other titles and other communities. There's obviously certain things that rub some of the community up the wrong way, but for the most part, like the toxicity I've seen in other communities is nothing. You got nothing compared to them, and I think that's just showing, like we showed at the beginning with all those videos, the growth and the development. I think that this little divide is teething problems. It's everywhere. You saw Hangry Camel mentioning it about Siege, Anthrax, who obviously runs Metal State. I think he's experienced it through everything, is that it exists everywhere. And I think that the fighting games community, what was the question? Let's discuss the divide in the fighting games community. Let's discuss it in one sentence. It's not as big as you think. There's issues, but they're fixable. And I think that you have more of a chance than many other scenes. So that was Technical Talks, episode 3. If you have any questions, I'm now going to move into the question and answer section. So ! Join, drop your question. And of course, if you have any topics, like, please help a girl out, because I need something else to talk about. It's time for questions and answers, and you know how this works. If you've dropped your question in, I'll answer it now. If you're watching on YouTube, unfortunately, these questions and answers are all live, which means you didn't have a chance, but you can watch the live stream every Wednesday and jump in. Let's go through the queue. I'm just going to open it up. So the first thing was, I'm actually going to answer, it wasn't technically submitted, but I'm going to answer it anyway, where Oceans asked me if FIFA is the worst divided community. Nah, dude. Not even close, my friend. Not even close. Not even close. Does that answer your question? If you do have a question, ! Join, or you can just drop them in the chat right now, because I'll be able to see them. I don't do tech or talks to be negative. I don't do tech talk. I mean, I make this joke all the time, but legitimately paid to talk for a living. I don't do tech girl talks to shit on anyone. I don't do tech girl talks to be a drama llama. So I ain't going to be negative and say which stream it is, but I can tell which divide and which title it is. I don't think FIFA's that bad. I'd be interested, Oceans, why you say that, though. Would be interested to hear. Let's answer the questions. The first question is from Trinok. And his question is, did you see my thing? And my answer is, no. The next question was from Gans. I actually answered this, but he's got, is this an org or actual community divide? And I did mention, I think that it filters down into different spaces. So sometimes between tournament organizers, sometimes between MGOs, sometimes between players, sometimes between content creators. It's all there. This conversation is kind of universal, and it can kind of be flicked and pushed on anything, I think. Okay, Defect asked and specifically said, I hear there is toxicity in the Fortnite community. And then Anthrax said, can we have some insight into what is going on with Fortnite ZA? Right. So to Defect's thing, there is toxicity in the Fortnite community, in South Africa specifically. I think that's what we're referring to. So I'll keep it South African specific. Of course, there's toxicity. You see it a lot. But I also think people need to understand that there's a very different generation playing Fortnite. So a lot of the Fortnite players are much younger, under 18. They've been let free on social media, and they maybe don't quite understand the ins and outs of it. They maybe don't quite understand the intricacies that come out. That word just almost failed me. The intricacies that come with social media and the damage that it can do in terms of repeating the conversations. And I also think when you are younger, if I look back on the way I behaved 4 years ago versus how I behave now, keeping in mind that I'm over 30 and 4 years ago I was late 20s, I cringe at some of the ways I behaved. I thought I was quite immature and I didn't really see the bigger picture. Also, I know that social media can have a negative effect in that you can sometimes get very wrapped up in the attention, the engagement, people commenting, people liking your stuff, people telling you you're funny. And think about when you were younger, you know, that can very much be the only thing that feeds you. And that can be problematic. Also, I think that the younger generation is in a different space. So the Fortnite community is a little bit more toxic to one another. I think they're also less... They're less aware of the damage their words can do. So I think that there needs to be... I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. I think that Fortnite ZA specifically. So Fortnite globally, because I've worked DreamHack Fortnite events, and I think that Fortnite globally has a group of, for want of a better word, influencers, commentators, content creators who are a little bit older, more mature, who can kind of like rally people in and say, not cool behavior, this is cool behavior, don't behave like that, this is why. And they kind of lead that community and allow them to, there's obviously drama that happens there, but for the most part they have those people to look up to who then put on a good example for them. Ninjas, I mean, I'm just spitting that out, but you know, can be a good example. I think in South Africa we don't have that. So you have a lot of young people and then a lot of other young people who maybe aren't mature enough to, and age, this actually doesn't come down to age, it comes down to maturity, but we have a lot of immature people telling other immature people how to behave. I'm going to get cancelled for calling the Fortnite community immature, but what I'm trying to say is the answer to the toxicity in the Fortnite community is to literally engage and converse, not on Twitter, in Discords, and talk to explain why the bad behavior, whether it be sexism or racism or homophobia, is wrong. Because I just think that communication is lacking there. So there's a lot of cancel culture that happens in Fortnite ZA, where the moment someone does something, everyone's like in there going cancel. And I was like, I don't necessarily think someone who's, I just want to be clear, I'm not justifying their behavior. But I also don't think that canceling someone on Twitter is going to fix them. I think if anything, it's going to make them even worse about it. So sure, they're not allowed to compete. They need to understand what their actions are, but just screaming at someone on Twitter doesn't resolve anything. I think if you see bad behavior from players, you need to, and this actually ties into what Anthrax asked. The Fortnite ZA community has had racism issues, sexism issues, and just today, homophobia issues. They've come up time and time again. The problem is when one of these players is called out on social media, everyone else jumps in and shits on them. So then they fight back, because when you're met with aggression, you fight back. And then there's this really horrible, I'm right, no, I'm right, shut up. Now, the truth is, the homophobic, racist, sexist person is not right at all. And they should not, this is like a whole Tech Girl Talks. That person should not be allowed to stand up and defend themselves, but they immediately do that because they're getting fought with online, and it's all very in their face, whatever. And I think that the way that needs to be handled is the more mature members in the community need to start going to organizations and saying, this is how your player behaves. You need to stop it. And then explaining to the player that this is really bad behavior, you're gross, and then block them. Which, I mean, I know that doesn't necessarily fix it, but I also think, and I see defects in screaming at racist, sexist, transphobic, on Twitter makes me feel good. It makes all of us feel good. We want to shout at them. But I just think it's so difficult to answer this question, actually. This is going to get complicated because I've just seen Sol's question. I saw defense, someone used religion in one of the threads in a less obvious, homophobic and offensive way. How would stuff like that be handled? I don't know a single religion. I'm going to be in so much trouble. I kind of don't want to be, I don't want this to become negative, but I'm going to answer this question, Sol, because I've seen the thread. I don't know a single religion that encourages you to make slurs against someone. Every religion that I know of tells you to be kind to people around you. Even if your religion is against what they say, there is not a single religion, but I don't know a single religion that says if someone does this, you should go and shit all over them and throw slurs at them. Like, come on, dude. No, I'm going way off topic, so I'm going to go back to my questions, but no, it wasn't a defense. It was gross. Someone needs to phone their parents, man. Legit. But I think that the Fortnite conversation is a whole conversation on its own. So it's not one that I necessarily want to jump into right now because we could go on forever. So I'm going to go back to the questions. I'm just quickly going through Barnacle. Let me just see. I'm going to answer the questions now. There we go. Thanks, Noob Slice. It's a difficult one to have, though, because I like to just make sure that I've got all my facts straight, and I don't quite have them here. So I'm always a little bit... This is one thing. I'm a bit dubious about commenting on this particular thing because I don't have all the facts. I've only seen bits and pieces of it. And I also don't necessarily think some of the things that I've said are the way to go about it. Like, it doesn't help that the person that everyone in the chat is talking about is a free agent who's not linked to a tournament organizer and things like that. So it's very difficult to call them out because of that. But I also don't think that, like, everyone just getting into a slinging match doesn't seem to fix the situation because I've seen it so many times. So I think that there's a deeper way, and I'd like to potentially reach out to people and get their opinions on how to fix it, because I don't necessarily, my opinion is that screaming at someone on Twitter does nothing. They just don't hear it. It's like shouting at a brick wall. But also not calling it out doesn't help either, right? So maybe that's a whole other conversation for Tech Girl Talks. We can talk about toxicity in gaming and just go into this. But I'm going to go back to my questions now because we were talking about the divide in the fighting games community. So Iggy wants to know how players from technically challenged regions can compete in FGC tournaments. So this is so difficult, right? Because the online elements of fighting games. So this was something that came up when I was asking people specifically about the divide in fighting game communities. And there was a lot of conversation around the online versus real life divide because it makes it so difficult. Obviously, it's not really designed for online. But I've heard via the grapevine that something might be coming. I think with the new Street Fighter, that could potentially change all of that, which would be fantastic. And that might change it. Because it's impossible for people to fly. I mean, I think like JabhiM and Iggy would kill to be able to go to all the big tournaments, but obviously flying is really expensive. So we definitely need more local investment in tournaments. But for now, we just got to pray that they fix the netcode situation, right? Next question. Chicken Wingers, I will get to yours. I just want to answer another fighting games one. Okay, so this is really interesting. Jabhi, do you think the divide comes from the expectations of the FGC? I mean, there is definitely a lack of communication between the players and the tournament organizers. I think that's the true divide. I don't really want to get into the factors that prevent some tournament organizers from reaching. I only got some of it, so I'm just going to quickly scroll up, because this thing I've just realized. There we go. I don't really want to get into the factors that prevent some tournament organizers from reaching out to other tournament organizers. That's another Bible. Yeah, man, I try to touch that as nicely as I can. But to answer your question, I do think that there is a divide from specifically that, and I've seen this, again, doesn't only apply to FGC. There is a divide between players and tournament organizers. I think sometimes tournament organizers are very stuck in a way that they have to do something, right? Whether it be because of the platform that they use, whether it be because of the sponsor obligations, whether for whatever reason they kind of go, okay, this is what this looks like, and this is what this is going to happen, and how it's going to look. And then the players go, well, no, that's not how we do things. That's not the best way for us. And then there's like this lack of communication, because the tournament organizer technically needs to be able to say, hey, listen, the reason we're doing it this way is because of XYZ, and you understand that we can't change this. But I feel like from both sides, and I've seen this so many times that I can confidently answer this one, is that there's a little bit of like this weird hard-headed thing where the tournament organizer goes, I'm going to do this tournament. I'm not going to reach out to the players to find out if this works for them. I'm not going to ask them about dates or anything like that. I'm just going to do this tournament. Then the players go, hold on, that's not going to work for us. This is why. And then there's this like weird thing where the players are like, screw that tournament organizer. And the tournament organizer is like, well, screw you guys, because we tried and you didn't support us. And it comes back to what I said earlier, where there does need to be, and I think you're 100% right, Jabhi, there is a bit of a lack of communication. But I also think there needs to be a bit more understanding. Anthrax has just mentioned that he reached out to the FGC and was banned off the Discord. So, this kind of speaks to the points I made earlier, and I think it's really good, is I think, again, there's this very weird mine, ours, as opposed to a potential conversation that needs to happen. With regards to that, Anthrax, I really would love it if you could reach out to Cactar Kid, Iggy, and Jabhi in the chat, because I know that they're all involved. There's so many fighting games WhatsApp groups that exist that I definitely think there would be such a great space for you to participate in these conversations and to talk to the community. It doesn't necessarily need to happen in one place. Cats, there's your tea. I'm trying to navigate this in the safest way I know how, dude. Yeah. But I think that there's definitely room to speak directly to the players. And I also think this is something that a lot of people maybe don't know, but hopefully I could promote, is that the likes of Jabhi and Iggy and Cactar Kid, they are so involved in like speaking to new players and other competitive players. And I think speaking to those top players will definitely help. I know that when I spoke to them, they were super helpful. And I think Anthrax, just dealing with them directly, they can really help you get your messages out. And I think back to Jabhi's question, I also think that it would really help if there was a conversation between the tournament organizers and the players. Back to Jabhi's question, I do think that there is that divide you mentioned does exist between the players and the tournament organizers. I think that there needs to be a little bit more understanding between the two. So maybe a communication point of view. And also, I think Fricky's just mentioned it. I wouldn't say it's a lack of communication, but more of a different business plan or branding among the organization. An organization could be viewed as a person. And like you mentioned, each person has different personalities that might not mesh well. That's more than fair enough. But I think what's really important is that sometimes it would help if the tournament organizer could explain why certain decisions are made to the players, and the players could explain to a tournament organizer how they'd prefer. and kind of meets in the middle. I think sometimes with players and tournament organizers, the players are so set on something being a certain way, and they get very upset if it isn't, which I completely get, because you want the competition to be fair and things like that. But sometimes the tournament organizer legitimately has certain confines they have to fit into. So discussing, talking, meeting in the middle. But with regards to this, Cactar Kid, Iggy, JabhiM, they're all in the chat. I'd love it if you could speak to Anthrax. The UGC guys are super helpful as well. Definitely have that conversation. JabhiM, I hope I answered your question. I know that it probably wasn't the best way to answer it, but I do think that there just needs to be that conversation that needs to happen. I think like what Anthrax mentioned with can't advertise events getting banned from groups, that's also problematic. Because, I get this because I've seen this before where people get really upset in like community discords and stuff about self-promotion. But I also think that sometimes it would help to have those conversations and for there to be those conversations happening. So JabhiM, I hope I answered your question. And now on to the next question. This is coming from Chicken Wingers. Esports content houses, would it be something in South Africa that works? I don't know. I don't know. I've seen a lot of esports houses, which I think kind of have faded away now. I've also seen you know what I think works is the concept of like a content house. So for example, like the Bravado Gaming has like a headquarters, where they create their I think that works, where all their players can come and, and that's where they can compete and create content from. I do think that there's a space for it. I worry, Chicken, in terms of what you're talking about, and I think what you're specifically talking about is this idea of a bunch of content creators living together, creating content. I think it's cool. You can help one another, but I don't think I think you would all be making money in individual pockets, if that makes sense. So I'm not 100% sure if it would work. But maybe this is something we need to delve into. So I'd love it if you could come into my Discord. I'll drop the link here, Discord. If you come into Discord in the esports chat, let's have a conversation, because maybe this is great for a future episode. But there we go. I think that's all the questions. Defect, you just gave me nothing, so I'm just going to delete that. Lauren says we'd all kill each other after the first week. Ain't wrong. I'm pretty sure I've pretty much answered everything. This got super scary at the end there, having to talk about something that I don't feel that I'm informed enough to discuss. But I tried to give the best opinion I could in that regard. I hope that I answered your question, Iggy, and you got what you were looking for from this episode of Tech Girl Talks. I'll answer 2 more questions because they've just come in, and I apologize. So Defect wants to know why there's not more resources put into esports broadcasters in South Africa. Am I incorrect in believing that the broadcast is just as important as the tournament? Defect, you're 100% correct. It is just as important as the tournament. It is also extremely expensive to run a broadcast correctly. Gear costs lots of money. People who know what they're doing cost lots of money. And the majority of brands, tournament organizers and stuff just can't afford to do it the way they want and can't afford to pay the right people, and it becomes really expensive to run it the way you want to run it. I think the likes of Metal States and UGC do the best that they can on very small budgets, but it legitimately comes down to money. And unfortunately, spending, I can honestly, the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of rands on really good broadcasts doesn't make sense when you're getting 1,000 concurrents, never mind 200, 300. So I think that is why less resources are put into it. I wish it wasn't the case. I also think that there are ways to make them far more interesting, but at this moment in time, the viewership's not there to justify it. It's also like, it's a chicken egg situation, right? Because would better broadcasts bring in more viewers, or do you wait for more viewers before you do better broadcasts? Once again, that is a whole hour that I could talk about. So if you like that, Defect says it's the ROI for investors, not when you're getting less than 1,000 concurrents watching. Even 1,000 is it's not good enough. I think that there's tournaments that, again, this is an hour-long conversation, Defect, but like I thought what Red Bull did with Campus Clutch was really good. So instead of they had a sneaky live stream. So the games were a live stream, but then they cut everything down, used social to share it and hyped it up. I thought that was very clever. They got a lot of engagements on that without necessarily running a full day stream. But then they still had the full production contingent there. I thought Hit the Streets did really well, but I do think that this is a conversation. I'd love to do this one. So hit me up in the Discord if that's what you want me to do next. Or tell me now if you're watching. And then the final question from Wraith. Do you think that there's also a divide between countries in Africa that prevents them from growing and competing on an international level? Like we can't develop our own skills compared to someone like Europe because Europeans are always playing with each other and therefore improving their overall skill level. And since we can't compete, we can't make a splash on an international level. Yes. I mean, you asked. Yes. Geographically, we are so far apart. It costs so much more to get everyone to each other that of course that there is that problem. 100%. Partnered with the fact that when it comes to fighting games, obviously being together in real life is so much better than being online. So now you need everyone to fly in to the same place, right? And that's expensive. And geographically, we're so much further apart. So, yes. I mean, Wraith, I don't know if you wanted a longer answer, you're just getting a yes, because you're right. I don't know what the fix is to that. Money, growth in the community, all of that, I think. That is it. That was episode 3 of Technical Talks, where we spoke about the divide in the fighting games community. And with regards to that last question, JabhiM mentioned it. Guilty Gear Strive is the fix. We'll have to wait and see. But that would be that. I mean, if we could fix that stuff and everyone could play online, it would change everything, right? That's what we want. I hope that you enjoyed the episode. The questions and answers there were pretty tough. That was pretty tough. And I might need to apologize on the internet very soon because I don't know. I think I did it the best I could. But of course, I'm always open to debates. I'm always open to, this is my opinion, and I'm well aware that my opinion isn't necessarily correct. So if someone wants to converse with me about that, I am more than happy to have that conversation, to agree to disagree or to change my mind. But let's all just play nice. And once again, I want this space to be a really positive, helpful space, which is why we don't shit on people here. I do not make comments unless I'm informed. It was why I mentioned with the Fortnite stuff where I don't feel informed enough to talk about it right now. I want to make sure I have all the facts. I think that's really important. Defect here has mentioned that he would love to talk about broadcasting next. Of course, I will be back next week, Wednesday. I think that the Fortnite conversation is quite an interesting one as well. I'd love to break down tournaments. So I'd love it if there's a tournament and I could just sit and like go into the players and tell you some of the storylines and kind of go into that. So if you have any topics that you think we should chat about on Technical Talks, I would love it if you could come onto my Discord or hit me up on Twitter. Tell me what you want me to talk about. If I can find a way to kind of jump into it and investigate it, I'd love to do that. So definitely let me know what you want me to talk about. Warped Space mentions game dev in South Africa. Yo, that's going to be lots of research, dude. I know nothing about dev, but I'm keen. Like, I want to do cool things. I want to try and talk about new, interesting topics. I just want us to get us talking. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, this is all my opinion and you are free to disagree. Just let me know. I'd love to have a bit of a debate with you. If you enjoyed this video and if you enjoyed these Technical Talks, then hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me, and give it a thumbs up. And of course, don't forget to come right back because next week, Friday, I'll be dropping episode 4 of Technical Talks, and I'll see you then.